But in the time remaining, I want to talk to you about another great step that democracies have to take, a step that I am very concerned that none of us are meeting, not here in Birmingham, not in my home now town of Palo Alto, California, nowhere. I said that America's creed has not been one of nationality or ethnicity or religion. It has been a creed that it doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going. You can come from humble circumstances and you can do great things. In my family, that creed meant that you had to do everything in your power to get a high-quality education, because that education was armor against anything that they might throw at you. We came by it naturally because one of the great heroes in my family was my grandfather, John Wesley Rice, Sr., one of the founding pastors of Westminster Presbyterian Church. And when John Wesley Rice, Sr. was a young man in Eutaw, Alabama, he decided he had to get book learning. And so he asked where a colored man could go to college. They told him about little Stillman College, which was about 30 miles away. And so he saved up his cotton. He went off to Stillman College. He got through his first year of college. They said, so how are you going to pay for your second year? He said, I'm out of cotton. They said, you're out of luck. But thinking quickly, he said, how are those boys going to college? And they said, well, you see, they have what's called a scholarship. And if you wanted to be a Presbyterian minister, then you could have a scholarship too. My granddaddy said, you know, that is exactly what I had in mind. And as I've said many times, my family has been college educated and Presbyterian ever since. You see, John Wesley Rice knew that that education was going to transform him into somebody he would otherwise never have been. And he knew that it would transform generations of Rices, so that my father would be college educated, and his sister, my Aunt Teresa, would go to the University of Wisconsin, and she would get a PhD in Victorian literature, and she would write books on Dickens. He knew that education was transformative, and it is. But in a day when I can look at your zip code and I can tell whether you can get a good education, can I honestly say it doesn't matter where you came from, it matters where you're going. We have a big job to do. K-12 education is in crisis. It is, to my mind, a national security crisis, because we know that if you cannot read by the time you are third grade, you won't read. And we know that we are condemning an awful lot of kids to a life in which they will not be employed. The $18 an hour unskilled labor job is gone forever. And when they're not employed, they will live on the government dole because they will have nowhere else to go. And we will continue to have the sad statistic that only 30% of the people who take the basic skills test to get into the military can pass it. But more importantly, we will tear ourselves apart because we are held together by that expectation of mobility, of not being trapped in your circumstances, in a belief that you might not be able to control your circumstances, but you can control your response to your circumstances. But you can't do that if you are not educated. And I challenge us all, because in many ways, Birmingham, which stands as such a symbol of a place that had abundant resources in the ground, but had to make changes to keep going, that's true of all the world now. You see, the 19th century was a time when what you could dig out of the ground was the source of your greatness. And then in the early 20th century, it was what industrial processes could you run? How efficient were your assembly lines? But in the second half of the 20th century and now in the 21st century, it is about human capital. People who decide to come to America from abroad, the best and the brightest, who want to immigrate here just to be a part of this great belief that you can come from humble circumstances and you can do great things. We need to make room for them, because without immigration, we have the same sclerotic demographics of Europe and Japan. But it is also people who are born here. The ability to cultivate and to draw our talent and our human potential from every walk of life, from every station in life, to know that every life is worthy and every life is worthy of greatness. That is when democracy is at its strongest, because it also causes each and every citizen to know that there is no point and no right to be aggrieved. Why do I not have? And there is no point and no right to be entitled. Why do they not give me? Entitlement and aggrievement are the death of innovation and creativity and responsibility to ourselves and to one another. They are ultimately the death of functioning, vital democracies. And so we have much to celebrate about the years since our darkest days and how far we have come as a city, as a state, as a nation. But we have so much more work to do if indeed this wonderful, unbelievable experiment that said people can come from all over and they can be born in any station in life and they'll be American. And that will mean something because they will know that it is on the basis of their own talents and their hard work that they can get ahead. And we would know, too, that that would be a shining beacon to all the world that looked to us as the greatest social and political and economic experiment in human history. That's what's at stake. I know that we will succeed because we have a history and a future to show that we know how to do it. Thank you very much.